Muse should become a sedevacantist. Part 2. 1. In the first of these essays, I ventured a plain observation that a man who prizes the sternness of the old church, who reaches, whenever the subject of hell arises, for the harshest sentence of the harshest saint and calls it evidence, cannot, without some violence to his own method, stop short of sedevacantism the moment that same sternness reappears in politics rather than eschatology. Among the proofs I offered was Florence. It has gone unanswered and may go on unanswered a good while yet, but silence is no title to an argument, and it would be idle to wait upon a reply merely to flatter myself that none is coming. Better, I think, to supply the objection myself, since I can build it more honestly than most of its natural owners would trouble to, that cantate domino concerns who is damned, and not what a Catholic prince owes a Protestant. Subject that dignitatis humanae occupies itself with an entirely different question, and that this comparison, however striking, is nearer a conjuring trick than an argument. It is, I confess, a fair objection, and I see no advantage in disguising the fact merely because no one has yet forced me to admit it. Florence was never the strongest witness to this particular charge. It was only the most celebrated, and I will own that I found the theatre of it agreeable. But a prosecutor is not undone by having called one witness who proves beside the point, provided 3 better witnesses wait in the corridor. I have 3, Gregory XVI, Pius IX, and Leo XIII, the very Pope whose memory Ethan honours, each of whom took up this precise question at length, in plain prose, and evidently on purpose, across the better part of a century. Florence I surrender without a struggle. These 3 I do not. 2. Consider first Gregory XVI, who in 1832 published Mirari Vos, and troubled himself not at all to be diplomatic about a doctrine now generally taken for granted. Liberty of conscience. The very proposition dignitatis humanae would enshrine as a right of the human person. 133 years afterward, he described in terms I will render exactly as false and absurd, or rather insane. The Latin word is deliramentum, not error, not an overstatement. Wanting correction but delirium, the term one reaches for when a man is raving. Such was the judgment the vicar of Christ, speaking as Pope, thought fit to pass upon the doctrine of a council, not yet dreamt of. From this poisoned source of indifferentism flows that false and absurd, or rather insane, opinion that liberty of conscience must be claimed and defended for everyone. It opens the way for that unrestrained freedom of opinion which is spreading ruin far and wide through sacred and civil affairs. Gregory XVI, Mirari Vos, sections 13 to 14. 1. A man does not call a proposition insane and intend by some silent reservation to affirm it 130 years later. Or if he does, the word insane has ceased to signify anything at all, and might as well be struck from the language. 3. If it be supposed that Gregory spoke in the heat of the moment, 32 years of continued silence on the matter argue otherwise. Pius IX took up the same doctrine in 1864, and did not content himself with denouncing it from the pulpit, but had it entered into a formal register of condemned errors, the syllabus appended to Quanta Cura, in which propositions 77 through 79 lie in wait like snares set about an old house. Proposition 77 is condemned, that it is no longer expedient the Catholic religion be held the only religion of the state to the exclusion of every other form of worship. It is worth pausing over what the condemnation of an error requires of a Catholic, not neutrality, but the affirmation of its opposite. To reject that sentence is to be bound to hold that the Catholic faith ought indeed remain the sole religion of the state. Proposition 78 meets the same fate, that certain Catholic countries had wisely permitted immigrants the public exercise of their own worship. Wise, according to Pius IX, is precisely what such laws were not. And Proposition 79 condemns the claim that liberty of worship and free public expression do not corrupt morals and spread indifferentism, which is to say in the Pope's own, reckoning that they do. I confess I do not know what better description could be found for the civil order dignitatis humanae proposes than the one Pius IX took the trouble to enumerate, and then not, without evident satisfaction, to condemn by name. 4. But it is Leo XIII who ought to give the most trouble, for Leo is no obscure or forgettable pontiff to be quietly set aside. He is the Pope whose 1888 letter against slavery, In Ye Plurimis, is regularly produced as evidence that the Church's conscience had been awake all along, only biding its hour. Let that stand, and consider what the same Pope, in the same year, published 1 month later, under the title Libertas Prestantissimum. Justice therefore forbids, and reason itself forbids, the state to be godless, or to adopt a line of action which would end in godlessness, namely to treat the various religions, as they call them, alike, and to bestow upon them promiscuously equal rights and privileges. Leo XIII, Libertas Prestantissimum, section 21, 2. And on the very right, a later council would declare fundamental to human dignity. This kind of liberty, if considered in relation to the state, clearly implies that there is no reason why the state should offer any homage to God or should desire any public recognition of him. But to justify this, it must needs be taken as true that the state has no duties toward God, or that such duties, if they exist, can be abandoned with impunity, both of which assertions are manifestly false. Leo XIII, Libertas Prestantissimum, section 21, 2. Manifestly false, not imprudent, nor merely regrettable in a more secular age, but false, and evidently so to any understanding not already corrupted by the fashionable opinions of the century. Such is Leo XIII's judgment, delivered in June, upon the very doctrine a later council would canonize in 1965. In May, he told the world that slavery offended human dignity. In June, that treating every religion alike before the law offended the dignity of God. I leave it to the listener to say how one half of this magisterium came to be inherited so eagerly, while the other half has yet to be mentioned at all. I will anticipate the objections, since they are not foolish ones, and a writer does himself no credit by answering only the arguments he can defeat. It may be said these were never pronounced ex cathedra. True enough, and beside the point, since no one claimed they were. What is claimed is the ordinary, plain, repeated teaching of 3 successive popes across 56 years, upon one question, arriving always at the same answer. If teaching so sustained does not bind a Catholic conscience, I confess myself curious. What does bind it? When the subject turns to Aquinas and to hell, it may be said the syllabus addressed particular nations and their particular disputes. I would only ask that Proposition 77 be read again. It says in the present day, not in Spain nor in New Granada, and it is appended to an encyclical that grounds its whole argument in natural law, a law which by its nature respects no border, a principle that binds Spain because it is true binds everywhere, or it was never a principle, but only a complaint dressed as one. A subtler retreat is available in Leo's own distinction between an authentic liberty, the liberty to worship the true God rightly, and the counterfeit liberty he condemns, which extends equal protection to worship rightly and wrongly alike. This is the serious objection and deserves to be treated as one. But observe what it concedes, that the liberty Leo approves is conditioned upon the religions being true, while the liberty dignitatis humanae grants is conditioned upon nothing. But being human, no one is to be forced to act in a manner contrary to his own beliefs. The council's own words inquires not at all whether those beliefs happen to be correct. That is exactly the promiscuous equality Leo called manifestly false. The distinction does not rescue continuity, it only states the reversal with more precision than I could have managed unaided. And it may be said, last of all, that dignitatis humanae operates upon an entirely different plane of doctrine, that the state's duty toward truth remains untouched, and only the question of civil coercion has altered. I answer that this distinction, however becoming in a seminar room, appears nowhere with comparable weight in the documents of 1832, 1864, or 1888. Three popes did not trouble themselves with such refinements. They condemned the proposition, root and a branch, as often as it was put before them. When one side of a dispute receives 56 years of escalating and deliberate defense, and the other a single conciliar sentence with a mollifying clause attached, the honest historian does not conclude that both sides were saying the same thing all along. He concludes more simply that one side prevailed and that it was not the older one. 6. Here then is Florence restored to its proper and modest place, and something sturdier set beside it. Cantate Domino, I have granted, answers a question of salvation and not of civil right. But mirari vos, the syllabus, and libertas prestantissimum answer the very question dignitatis. Humani answers in its own terms, and answer it with the words absurd, insane, and manifestly false, aimed at the very doctrine a later council would baptize as a right belonging to every soul on earth. The choice I proposed in the first of these essays has not softened upon closer acquaintance. If anything, it has sharpened. Either Gregory XVI, Pius IX, and Leo XIII spoke with the authority of their office when they called religious liberty insanity and manifest falsehood, in which case dignitatis humanae is not development but betrayal, and the road from there is well known. Or they spoke without binding authority, and three successive popes were simply and gravely mistaken in formal encyclicals upon a question each regarded as elementary, in which case the Church has shown herself capable of sustaining serious error for the better part of a century, which is precisely the admission that a seamless continuity was invented to avoid making. No one is entitled to keep Leo XIII's conscience on slavery while disowning his convictions on liberty, as though a man's magisterium were a table spread with dishes from which one may take what pleases and leave the rest untouched. He did not consider himself inconsistent. On this evidence, neither was he. Source dossier and quotation notes. 1. Pope Gregory XVI, Encyclical Mirari Vos, August 15, 1832, sections 13 to 14. Official Vatican Archive Latin and English text, vatican.va. False and absurd, or rather insane, is the standard English rendering of deliramentum. Some translations give madness or raving. 2. Pope Leo XIII, Encyclical Libertas Prestantissimum, June 20, 1888, sections 19 to 21. Official Vatican Archive text, vatican.va. Leo XIII also distinguishes an authentic liberty of worship/conscience, liberty to obey the true God, from the liberty of worship he condemns. Civil immunity extended equally to true and false religion, addressed directly in section 5 above. Proposition sources: Pope Pius IX, Quanta Cura, and the attached Syllabus of Errors, December 8, 1864. Propositions 77, 78, and 79, section 10. Errors having reference to modern liberalism. Each is a condemned error, the Church is affirmed. Position is the negation of the listed statement. Proposition 77 cites the allocution Nemo Vestrum, 26th of July 1855. 78 cites Acabissimum, September 27th, 1852. 79 cites Nunquam 4, December 15th, 1856. In plurimis, Pope Leo XIII, in plurimis, May 5, 1888, addressed to the bishops of Brazil on the abolition of slavery, cited only for the same pope, same year contrast with Libertas Prestantissimum, June 20, 1888. See Part 1 for the slavery history discussion. Dignitatis Humanae, Second Vatican Council. Dignitatis Humanae, Section 2, Official Vatican English text. All men are to be immune from coercion, in such wise that no one is to be forced to act in a manner contrary to his own beliefs.